Hello guys, this is the final scene of Act 4. So there's only 3 more scenes after this, and 2 of them are very short. Like me. So as I mentioned in the last video, Act 4 is an interesting one because Romeo is never seen. He doesn't play any part in Act 4 kind of on stage. It's all about Juliet. Act 4 is all about those kind of fast-paced and impulsive decisions that Juliet makes. And, you know, the short scene lengths in this act are definitely kind of symbolic of that. And this is the act where she kind of gives up everything. She literally sacrifices everything. And if you think back to Act 2, Scene 2, the balcony scene, you know, why do you have to be called Romeo? And, you know, deny thy father, refuse thy name. But if Romeo can't, then she will, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. She's kept her word. She's done that. It's almost like her emotional state is kind of, ironically, it's pausing the conflict between the two families, and it's all now about as if kind of the entire world, all of fate and everything going on is designed to keep Romeo from being with Juliet, and you know that everything is happening to stop that even occurring. Kind of, you know, the idea of fate in terms of context. Interesting. Now, there are only kind of a few more times that we get to do this, but this is one of them. And it's going to be an emotional one, really. So, you know, get the tissues ready. You're going to be crying at the incredible and honest and frankly terrible acting that you're about to see. But sometimes, if someone was very, very awful at acting, the scene might look a little bit like this.
Mistress, what mistress? Juliet fast, I warrant her. She, why lamb, why lady, fie, you slugabed. Why love, I say, madam sweetheart, why bride? What not a word, you take your penny's worth now. Sleep for a week. For the next night, I warrant the county Paris hath set up his rest. You shall rest but little, God forgive me. Marry and amen. How sounds is she asleep? I needs must wake her, madame, madame, madame. Aye, let the county take you in your bed. He'll fright you up, I faith, will not be. What dress, and in your clothes, and down again? I must needs wake you, lady. Lady? 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 Alas! Alas, help, my lady's dead! Oh, we're a day that ever I was born, some aqua vita hell.
What noise is here?
Oh, lamentable day!
What is the matter?
Look, look! Oh, heavy day!
Oh me! Oh me, my child, my only life! Revive! Look up, or I'll die with thee! Help! Help! Call help!
For shame, bring Juliet forth, her lord is come.
She's dead, deceased, she's dead, alack the day!
Alack the day, she's dead! She's dead! She's dead! Oh, let me see her. Out. Alas, she's cold. Her blood is settled, and her joints are stiff. Life and these lips have long been separated. Death lies on her like an untimely frost upon the sweetest flower of all the field.
Oh, lamentable day!
Oh, woeful time! Death that hath taken her hence to make me wail ties up my tongue and will not let me speak.
If there was one word to describe that, it was interesting. So this scene starts with quite a dark, I've always felt it had quite a dark undertone, this part. I often kind of try and, in my mind, kind of relate it to you know, the scene in Bambi where the mother is shot. Spoiler alert! Whoa. And that kind of, that horrible kind of dramatic irony that we know what's really going on. Or The Lion King, actually, where Simba is trying to wake up Mufasa, who's just been killed. Again, spoiler alert. I should probably say spoiler alert before I give the spoiler, but I don't really care. It's that kind of horrible dramatic irony that we know what's going on, we know that they're actually dead, and they haven't yet, and we're just waiting for them to realise, and that's what makes it so kind of excruciating and horrible to watch. Now, we're watching this with dramatic irony and the information that we know that Juliet is not dead. You know, it could be seen as a bit funny, but actually, again, it's got that kind of horrible dark undertone that she's about to find her and thinks she's dead, and the nurse is probably closer than anyone to Juliet in her family, so it's going to be hard to watch. And I've seen some great actors play the nurse, and the ones who play the part best, you know, are the ones who really show grief at this point. So in terms of language, we get a lot of kind of caring words. We get a semantic figure of care, of love. We get hints of a good relationship, basically. You know, she talks about calling her a lamb and sweetheart and love and bride. You know, all these kind of pet names and nicknames that the nurse has for her. Really kind of, again, being microcosmic of their relationship for the last 13 years. That she has been there day and night for Juliet and has been the caregiver in her life, even if she isn't the biological mother. So it gets to a point where she isn't waking up, and the nurse just thinks that she is really sleepy or whatever. So then she opens the bed curtains and she sees that Juliet's still dressed. If you remember, she didn't kind of go into bed and then drink. She was talking. She had a soliloquy where she kind of spoke her thoughts, and then she drank and collapsed onto the bed. And she's seen her fully dressed, and then she says, "Oh, I need to wake you." And then she goes a bit closer. "Lady, lady." And then it clicks. The penny drops. She realizes that Juliet is seemingly dead. I think it's kind of one of, you know, probably the only real, genuine emotional distress we actually get in this scene. Because Lady Capulet and Lord Capulet and Paris all come in, but, you know, for reasons I'm going to go into it later on, we don't know if it's as genuine as we might think from kind of just the language used. Now, Lady Capulet comes in and says, oh me, my child, my only life, revive, look up, or I will die with thee." Now, you read that and go, wow, what a mother. She wants to either have Juliet wake up and be okay and be revived, or she doesn't want to live because she can't cope without Juliet. Romeo is actually the one who's going to die with her because he can't live without her. Is it really the case that someone Juliet has only known for days, rather than 13 years, loves her more than her own mother? And to be honest, probably yeah. You know, contextually, we know that mothers often didn't raise, well, rich mothers, if they had the means, didn't raise their children. They hired someone else to do it. Even if Romeo's love wasn't so impulsive and so powerful and strong and potent, I don't think it's very hard to beat Lady Capulet's love for Juliet. I don't really think it's difficult. If you remember in Act 3, Scene 5, she says, "Do what thou wilt, I'm done with you." One little part, and even Lord Capulet says, you know, you've got a chance to redeem yourself if you do this. But when Juliet asks Lady Capulet for any support, she just goes, "Nah, I agree, you're done, whatever, bye." We're not seeing a lot of kind of care being thrown towards Juliet from Lady Capulet. So the idea that she's coming in and all kind of distressed and distraught, and, you know, there's some really emotive language that's thrown out there by Lady Capulet and Lord Capulet in this scene. And we are questioning, how genuine are you? Are you actually bothered? And are there different reasons that you will be bothered if you are bothered? So Capulet comes in and he learns that she is dead. And he says, "Let me see her." And then he says, "She's cold." Okay? The blood is settled, her joints are stiff. Life and these lips have long been separated. Then he uses a lot of metaphorical language in this part. He says, "Death lies on her like an untimely frost upon the sweetest flower of all the field." So he's referring to death as this metaphorical influence, this physical being, as if, you know, death has married her almost. And he actually does say that later on in the scene. But he also says untimely. Yeah, the idea that this is before her time. Now, we could think about actually why is he saying that? Yes, she's very young, but he was trying to use her to gain the family some reputation, some wealth, some status. So does it mean that, oh, you died before we could use you, almost? Now, I don't think he's actually thinking that, but at the back of his mind, is that the reason he's subconsciously so upset? That actually you were just using her and you're upset that you can't use her anymore. We also see the superlative as well, the sweetest flower of all the field. Now, quite the juxtaposition, where one act previously he called her a disobedient wretch, and he says that they weren't even blessed to have her as a child. We've got reason to question their motives, really, and question how actually upset they are with her death, or her apparent death. Now then, we get the repetition of Lamentable Day. Now, I wanted to wait till this one because the nurse says Lamentable Day, and Lady Capulet, if you remember, these little spaces where it's kind of indented slightly in the page, is the idea that the actor kind of interrupts slightly the person speaking before. So the nurse goes, "Oh, lamentable day," and before she's even finished, Lady Capulet's shouting, "Oh, woeful time," which is kind of synonymous. Yeah, lamentable meaning sad, woeful meaning sad, and day and time similar. Yes, it's seen earlier on, but at that point, Lady Capulet didn't know what was wrong. Okay? So it's as if Lady Capulet is almost learning from the nurse how to give a damn, how to actually care about her child being dead. But there's that kind of synonymous syntactical pattern there. There's the exclamation "oh," and then there's the negative adjective, lamentable or woeful, and then there's some kind of reference to a period in time, so time or day. So then Capulet replies that death has made him wail. It's made him cry more than he's ever cried. He also says it ties up his tongue and will not let him speak. Okay, so he's absolutely speechless. He's so upset, he's so speechless. Oh, wait, what's this down here? You're a liar. And then the friar comes in, and obviously the friar knows the plan, and he says, "Is the bride ready to go to church?" Obviously he's playing along. And Capulet says, "Ready to go, but never to return. Oh, son, the night before thy wedding day." And he's just saying he's so upset he can't speak, and he's so speechless, and now he's going into some really kind of abstract metaphorical patterns with his language here. It's just fishy. It doesn't make sense. He says, "The night before thy wedding day, death hath lain with thy wife." So he's talking to Paris, as in, it's as if death has slept with Juliet and now she's dead. And then he says, "She was a flower and has been deflowered by him," as in, kind of play on the idea of sleeping as in sex, that death has slept with her and deflowered. Yeah, so deflowered is a kind of colloquial way of talking about someone losing their virginity, or giving their virginity away. He also talks about death being his son-in-law. Death is his heir, and all these metaphors. And he's just talked about the fact that he's completely speechless and he's tongue-tied. What? This doesn't make any sense. So again, we're putting together some ideas that maybe he's not being as genuine, and the family aren't being as genuine in their grief as first thought. That maybe there's a different reason they would be upset about her death. That she was a kind of a social and economic tool they could use, which is harsh but probably true. Now, obviously, it continues, and we see these kind of multi-modified noun phrases. So, several negative adjectives there. Accursed, unhappy, wretched, hateful day. Yeah? Really piling it on. There's the asyndetic list of adjectives, and it's piling on the misery because linguistically they want to try and come across that they are so upset. The adjectives continue with the idea of superlatives. The most miserable hour that time ever saw, that hyperbole. Whenever I've read this, I've always thought that the nurse is the one who's being genuine. I think she isn't coming up with poetic and, the language Capulet and Lady Capulet are using is great. Shakespeare's done pretty well there. It's really kind of effective language. But thinking about how relatable it is, if something happens, you might swear, because swearing is the most kind of potent way of expressing an idea. If you are really upset, you don't kind of poetically go on a whole rambling about something. You might swear, you might say one thing over and over again, because that's the one thing that sums up how you feel. And the nurse is kind of doing that. Look, she just keeps saying and keeps using exclamations, stutter. So we see exclamations all the way through, and we also see just woeful, 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 woeful. Yeah, there's all these kind of synonyms with just the negative feelings that she has, and she's not talking about it in some really kind of deep metaphorical abstract way. It's just raw emotion. And again, it's horrible to see if you see a really good actor to do it. Horrible as in it's really good and it really gets you. That you just feel horrible, that this is a tragedy. When a feeling's gone and you can't go on, it's tragedy. Now we see, again, more superlatives coming from people like Paris. It talks about the most detestable death. And again, we've got alliteration there. So alliteration is used to draw you in. So it's kind of, you focus on those words. And we're seeing that pattern all the way through. Same with Capulet. We're seeing tons of adjectives. Hated, martyred, distressed, despised, uncomfortable, all these different ideas. Now the friar, even though he knows that this is not actually her death, and he knows the plan, he is still not putting up with it. He's heard all this, and he's like, are you serious? So he says, for shame. So you need to all be quiet, for shame. So he says an interesting point here in terms of contextually about belief, that heaven and yourself had part in this fair maid. So you owned part of Juliet, and so did heaven, as in her soul. And now heaven has got all of her. Yeah? And he also says, but it's better for the maid that heaven's got all of her. It is better for her that she's no longer with you. He says that the most they sought was her promotion. And it was your heaven that she should be advanced. So the idea that they were using her, like I mentioned earlier, that they're using her, she is a tool, she's a bargaining chip, she's a negotiation tool that can be used by them to excel themselves. And maybe that's why they're actually so upset. I think one of the interesting ideas as well for this part, this little monologue that Friar Lawrence says is, even if you see Romeo and Juliet's love as naive and immature and kind of and youthful and kind of not fully realized because they're young and they don't know what they're doing and stupid, you can never deny that they genuinely believed it. Yeah? Even if they were wrong in their beliefs, they genuinely believed it. They believed in love, they believed in loving each other, and they believed that they were the best people for each other. Yeah? They were genuine, they were honest, and they were true to themselves. So the idea that Capulet, Lady Capulet, etc. aren't being genuine is kind of insulting to the idea of love. And to think about it, you're in the audience realizing this, going, actually, there are people dying in the streets on this war between the two families, and there's this love that is really genuine between. So even if it does lead to kind of misery and death for Romeo and Juliet, which it does, because star-crossed lovers take their life, we kind of see this, Lord, Lady, and Paris all acting so melodramatically, so over the top, almost kind of routine, that it's almost insulting. It's kind of offensive to the idea that actually you've caused all this horrible hate and war between the two families, and the emotional turmoil is all your fault. It's their fault in the first place that these two couldn't be together. And these two being genuinely in love is the thing that will kind of save the whole situation. Yeah? Because again, from the prologue, we know that that's the way it works. So the friar isn't holding back, really. And I think it's a great little monologue that he kind of really chides them. He really goes for them. So he tells them to get a grip, basically. He says, dry up your tears, stick your rosemary on this fair corpse, but meaning corpse. And as the custom is, in her best array, bear her to church. So let's get it done. We need to get her to the church, and we need to get on with this because this is ridiculous. We shouldn't be having this kind of big melodramatic scene. Let's just do what the custom is and go and have her buried. And Capulet's response is to say, okay, everything that we've made a festivity for the wedding is now going to be used for the funeral. So we get a whole list of juxtapositions here. So he talks about the instruments being turned into melancholy bells. And he says the wedding cheer to a sad burial feast, solemn hymns to the sullen dirge's change, etc., etc. So we see a juxtaposition in terms of the syntax used and a pattern of that in Capulet's language. So everything is really easy to fix, it seems like, for Capulet. Yeah, Tybalt's just died. Oh, I know. We'll marry off Juliet. Great. Or Juliet's just died. Oh, I know. Everything we planned for this, we'll just switch over. It's like everything's a business deal for him. Yeah, and he's always thinking about, we will turn everything. You know, he's not just saying screw everything, send everything home. I need to be alone. He's saying we'll still have a feast, but it'll be a funeral feast. We're still gonna have music, but it's gonna be sad music. We're still gonna have flowers, but they will be sad flowers. That's kind of often how I've read into this, that he's trying to use everything to still put his own status and family first, as in kind of their power and their influence first. Now, Friar Lawrence has the last word before they all exit, except the nurse and the musicians, and he says, you need to all go and prepare to follow her to her grave. And he says, the heavens do lower upon you for some ill, as in, you've all screwed up and the heavens know it. Now remember, again, Friar Lawrence, contextually, is the person for advice, the person who knows everything, kind of the person who is kind of the messengers from God almost, yeah? So they all leave, and then it's just the musicians. And Peter comes in, and we get some comedic relief, which you might think is surprising. And I think the first time I read this, I thought it was a bit surprising. Why is there being comedic relief now? But actually, they serve a better purpose than just comedic relief. They are thinking about how they're going to get their next meal. Now, what I mean by that is they are the only relatable people in this entire play. The musicians and the servants. They're not a bunch of rich people whinging about whatever. Yeah? Nothing else is really relatable for an Elizabethan audience except these musicians who are saying, well, if the wedding's off, how are we going to pay for dinner? How are we going to pay our rent? How are we going to do this, this, and this? Obviously, not all of that is explicit in there, but that's the idea of this conversation that happens. They're the only ones that actually we can go, oh yeah, that's actually what life is like. That when something happens, you're like, oh, actually, I don't have any food to eat. And it's all well and good them just saying, oh, okay, we won't have the wedding now. But for them, for the musicians, for the cooks, they're the relatable ones. They remind us, they bring us back down to earth and go, actually, no, this is reality. You know, there's Peter kind of asking for a sad song because he's all sad. And they're going, okay, well, if you pay us, we'll play for you, sure. And he goes, no, I'm not going to pay you, but just play me a sad song. And he says, no, you need to pay us. You know, he talks about, because silver hath a sweet sound. And he says, what do you mean? He says, silver sound, because musicians sound for silver. We play for money. So you need to give us some money if you want to hear us play. We're not just here because you're sad, and we're not going to kind of do that for free. We've got to earn a living. And kind of Peter again tries to sing and tries to get a whole performance out of them. And they say, do you know what? Screw him. It's all right. Let's leave. We'll go in here and we'll tarry for the mourners and stay for dinner. So we're going to stay here, have some of the food from the feast, and then we'll go because we're clearly not going to be paid. So we may as well take something that we can from the situation. So yes, it ends on comedic relief, but also it actually ends on a bringing back to reality that, you know, obviously in this time, a lot of this stuff was important for people in terms of arranged marriages and stuff, but the vast majority of people were peasants, were people who did not have the money, who did not live in mansions, who did not kind of, you know, grow up just to marry someone rich and kind of lounge around for the rest of their life, which kind of seems to be what kind of, you know, Lady Capulet has done, for example. An interesting kind of ending to this act from Shakespeare, I think. in terms of kind of the tone that's set. Interesting. All right, so that is the end of this scene and the act, and there are only 3 more scenes to go. And obviously, again, in terms of our narrative arc, we're right at the bottom now. It's going to end in disaster. And yeah, there we go. So if you've got any questions, do let me know. And in the meantime, stay safe. Bye-bye.
Shall we go from the last says? He'll fright you up. I faith. Well, I'll do that again. Oh, lemon table dead.
What is the matter?
Look.
Lemon table.
What? Lemon table.
Lamentable.
Lemon table. I was like, why's there a lamp on the lemon table? Alas! Alas, help! Help, my lady's dead! Oh, we're a day?
Where are they?
We're a day, okay.
Oh, it was a day.
This Shakespearean language, I can't read it. Lady, alas, help, my lady's dead.
You can't make a noise. You're dead.
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry.
The blood is settled and her joints are stiff. Life and... You're meant to be dead! Seriously.
It's really hard. No! Okay. I'll just be sorry. Oh. Lemon table. Sorry, I thought it was a zombie. Right, I'll go from...
Brains!
Is that okay? Yeah. Very dusty. Lemon table. See, kids? It's not just you that can't spell. You could have
Benedictina.
Have you seen her?
Have you seen her?
Benedictina.
And...
Oh, lemon table!